This is Media Mixology, and when we were putting together the agenda for the event, what we really wanted to do, what we were talking about with advertisers and agencies and media owners, was that there was a real need for integrated planning across channels. And so this entire theme has been dedicated to more holistic media planning, better media decisions. And I'm really excited today to have with me Jennifer Ray and Nicole Christensen. It's going to be a great session. What we're going to be looking at doing is determining the optimal media channel mix across different markets. So, Nicole, if you'd like to just introduce yourself briefly and then tell us, what is Bumble?
No, absolutely. Oh, a bit of an echo. I'm Nicole. I am the EMEA Integrated Marketing Director at Bumble, and I take care of initiatives that are EMEA-wide and also do a lot of work on new market expansion. So looking at the new markets we're going into and kind of setting them up for success, getting them to a certain stage, and then they kind of move into a full country management. And Bumble is a dating app where we're famously known for the app where women make the first move. We are built on the idea when dating is better for women, it's better for everyone. And we really believe in building out a world of equitable and healthy relationships.
Great, fantastic. And can you just tell me at a top level about where Bumble has expanded to, particularly in the last few years, this year, the different markets, and in terms of those markets, where the level of growth is planned for the next few years too?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched Southern Europe in the last year, and we've been in Spain now for a year, and Italy and Portugal for around 6 months. We've also been starting to go into Southeast Asia a little more, launching in the Philippines and Singapore. And we're still, we'd say, in quite early stages in France. We've been in France for about 2 years now. And I'd say all those markets are a big priority for us. And we also continually launch in new regions, kind of at the beginning or the middle of each year. Which ones I can't say, but we've got more in plan for the new year as well.
So how many markets is that in the last few years, if you know a number?
So it's different between marketing and the Bumble app being available in general.
Yeah.
So Bumble app being available in general, we are in 70 different countries now.
Wow.
And then for EMEA and APAC marketing, I think we're currently at 18.
Okay, great. Jen, could you just tell us a little bit about when Nicole comes to you and says, we're launching in yet another market, and you go, what's the strategy there on your side? How do you recommend the media mix? What's the first thing that you think about?
Yeah, I think with Bumble, we were just chatting about it before the session, but with Bumble, we have a lot of data and a lot of measurement that we can draw from, right? So we have things like brand health tracking, registration data. We have media metric data for markets we're currently in, brand health studies with partners that we're pretty good about putting in place. So when we're looking at a new market, we first look at our existing markets and kind of go in with a very informed hypothesis about what we think might work, what we've seen move brand metrics in the past, what we've seen move business metrics in the past. But that said, every new market is a new challenge. So I think the first step we do is look at what is the job to be done in that new market. Nicole's mentioned a lot of different varied markets. As you can imagine, the dating app category varies quite a bit market to market. So when you're looking at more traditional or kind of societal norms kind of around dating, it's a different approach you need to take. So we work with Bumble across LATAM as well. So entering those markets, it's kind of a different comms approach you need to take when you're looking at women taking the first move specifically. Also things like category rejection. So you mentioned France. When we're entering that market, you're kind of up against an uphill battle where dating apps are viewed as sleazy, if you can imagine. And I think there it's a different comms approach too. It's not just an awareness job. It's around actually educating what Bumble is and why it's different than some of the other apps they may have been exposed to in the past. From there, we're looking at the audience for that market. It's not always the same audience, so the age range when people are in market dating, when they're getting married, it varies market to market. Where they're centralized in a market, so are they really kind of heavily centralized in kind of key cities? Is it a bit more spread out? What is our approach around that? And then where they're spending their media, where they're getting exposed to new brands, where their kind of trusted media sources are, where they're kind of living and playing. The cost of media, conscious I'm just rattling off media planning principles, but thinking about it, I think differently. Like as you look at like a portfolio of a market, it's actually a really different like journey and kind of comparing the different levers. But the cost of media is a big one. Obviously, we've entered some more expensive markets and some really efficient markets, which when you have launch budgets, which tend to be quite lean and need to kind of demonstrate value very quickly, we're looking at how do we actually make sure that we're building viable comms planning at the right levels to make a dent in that market, and then making sure that that media mix is kind of sufficiently funded so that when we're even exploring markets really early on in the funnel, if the market's too cost prohibitive, that's kind of factoring into the business decisions as well. And I guess then the more fun bit of that is once we kind of have those baselines built, it's how do we actually create a bit of impact and breakthrough in a market? Because Bumble has a really great, strong brand personality. And I think the fun bit is trying to figure out like how we crack that in the different markets. Anyone who's seen Bumble marketing knows like loves a bit of cheeky at home, and I think it's something the brand does really, really well. But what that looks like in different markets can be quite different. And I think with lean budgets, being really punchy and pointy about like how we actually activate that, really hinging on cultural moments that the brand can have a bit of a say in or a bit of a role in that market for our audience. And then kind of, I think, yeah, just having like a physical presence in a market as well with out of home. Like when you're a digital brand, it's kind of important to kind of stake a claim.
Is it primarily out of home where your focus is in most markets? Have you got a focus channel, or is
No, I think out of home is one of the more fun ones to plan. So I kind of mentioned that one, but like when we're looking at a new market, it's really dependent on that media usage and the role that we need to do there. So France, for example, we've done linear TV, which is different than we've done in kind of the majority of the markets we manage for Bumble. And I think Havas works across about 20 markets for Bumble. So that was a kind of a different mix. India, we've done some really nice high impact print, for example. So I think what that punchy bit is varies, but I'll go back to out of home because it's one of my favorite channels.
Yeah. And surely, you mentioned the cheeky element, right? How do you, surely the cheeky element doesn't work in all markets, but the people are different. Maybe it won't land like our British sarcasm, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think a lot of it also comes from the fact, obviously, when we're looking at messaging planning as well, what we look at is what is our overall kind of brand message and company messages for the year, and then what are the underpinning stories that need to be told in different markets. And that can really vary based on how unique the market is. To Jen's point, the level of category rejection, how long we've been there. And that also really heavily affects our media planning because, for instance, in some markets, if we have a big brand digital video and there's not high category rejection in that market and they understand the message perfectly, we can stick to digital media channels. We don't need to create a high amount of assets. It's a more straightforward way for us to be present in a market versus other markets where we need more brand education, we need to tell more complicated stories, and where we need to really get cut through beyond what we pay for. Those are the markets where we start looking at channels where we say, okay, where can we drive that? And out of home is a really good example of where we've done that in the past. Kind of not a lower lift, but a lower lift than you might think. Like for us, our kind of trademark, Bumble out of home, is just a yellow billboard with black copy. But because we stand for dating, we stand for equality, there's a lot we can say that people do find interesting. And what we've seen in the past is like, not that good copy is easy to write, it's definitely hard to write, but when we get it right to the extent we will see a big social media amplification around people just taking photos of that out of home, talking about it. And we've really used that as a lever over and over again to try and establish ourselves or generate conversation in market, again, beyond what we pay for. And that's what we look at a lot is, yes, we'll have digital brand media running and we'll have that running continually to build brand awareness. But what are those ways we can drive conversation around dating in a market? How do we kind of land our brand proposition, essentially? And yeah, that's one big thing for us and why out of home has been such a key channel for us.
Is there a particular way that you get the insights to inform that messaging in different markets?
We do a lot of focus groups. So we do generally have an idea before we're entering a market at the level of category rejection, also how dense the competitive landscape is.
Yeah.
And then based on that, we will do a lot of focus group work with both women and men, understanding how they feel about dating. Like, I'd say definitely one of the more interesting parts of my job is just reading lots of dating research about how people in different countries feel about dating and how they feel about the idea when we're making the first move and how we approach that.
And you talk about out of home and its social amplification. We've seen a lot of examples recently of fake out of home and social amplification. What do you think about that?
I personally don't find it particularly offensive in terms of like if a company's got an Instagram post, and there's been a lot of one CGI artist who did a piece for Maybelline, and I don't know if you've seen it around the eyelashes on the tube, and that went quite viral. And I looked at this artist and I kind of thought, should we work with him? And I thought, no, absolutely everyone is going to work with this artist. And I've seen about 20 brands in the last month that have, but it looks cool, and I don't see any harm in it. I don't think there's any harm from people wondering if something's real. I don't think anyone's misleading the public in a way that causes any harm.
I'm going to come to the audience for questions soon, so get thinking. Definitely have your thinking caps on. But first, I just want to talk, Jen, to you about how you're actually not just optimizing this, for each company, but how do you actually measure that? How do you then decide, test and learn? How do you decide, actually, maybe this didn't work, but we're going to take this different approach instead? Or maybe examples of where that data and those insights led you down a rabbit hole, maybe that wasn't the correct path.
Yeah, I think from our side, there's probably two bits that it's really important in getting right. One is measurement, going back to the initial chat, like the data we have to plan, but the data we have to measure effectiveness, making sure that those, however you're planning to measure it, that's in place up front, and that, I think even more importantly, that all stakeholders are aligned on what those KPIs are, so that from a business perspective down to the media, that you're very clear on what you're trying to prove in the short, mid, long term for a new market. I think the other bit of that is having flexibility, both in media plans. So we're building plans that have a level of flexibility because, like I said, we're going in with an informed hypothesis, but we don't know if that's going to be the right thing to do. We don't know if the messaging is going to land or the channel mix is going to be right. If people start putting comments on kind of social ads we're running, like how do we make sure that we're kind of prepared to adapt to that if it's not something that we wanted to see? And I think something that we've gotten really good at Bumble over the kind of a bit of trial and error in terms of like managing quarter over quarters, being really meticulous and looking at what we're changing, what are the levers we're changing quarter over quarter, whether it's audience or media channel, regional splits, so that when we see either a dip or a spike in terms of performance, that we know what those levers that might have been driving it really quickly, so we can do either more of it or less of it, or course correct. And I think one of the things that's been really helpful for us working with Bumble is also to have flexibility in our agency client model, so that we knew market expansion was going to be a key kind of focus for Bumble. So we've built a team that has kind of a central capacity to do that planning, insight work, market exploration, but then also flexibility to put people in market where we need to deliver on that, whether it's cultural kind of nuance that needs to be established in terms of ways of working, language issues in terms of working with local vendors. So teams in LATAM, for example, teams in India that can actually work on the brands there. And the last part of the question was around examples of something that hasn't worked.
Yeah, exactly. And anything where maybe one of your focus groups strongly suggested that you go down a certain messaging path and it blew up in your face. I guess maybe you can't tell me about those examples.
Trying to think of any blow-ups.
Anything go horrendously wrong?
I don't think horrendously wrong. I think we've definitely had different ideas in the past of how a market would react to us as a dating app and gotten it a bit wrong. Like there's been markets we were entering and we felt like the category rejection would be quite high. Like it was going to be hard for us to acquire users. We'd have to do a lot of brand education and maybe not spend as much on growth channels, and then realize that we actually got the mix wrong. We could push harder on growth and step away a bit from brand awareness. In other instances, we've had to quickly do it the other way around. We've realized actually our cost to acquire is looking very high. Clearly, we've not done the necessary brand work, and we need to extend the period we're doing that. And what we do look at is in terms of, okay, of our overall Europe portfolio, then where do we make up for that in different markets and how do we play that around? And we do look at that quite extensively, making sure we're being realistic, especially entering new markets, around the level of growth we're going to get back and the brand work that needs to be done, because it's very easy as well for us to say, okay, we will put a ton into user acquisition and we'll hit all our targets, and for that to really hurt us in the long term, because we are just investing in short-term growth. And I think that's also the piece around our targeting, because sometimes we've really thought, we would see a level of growth going more in several different cities and then realize we have to pull way back and focus on just getting one and winning one before we move onwards. But I think definitely one thing we've got right in our partnership is just building a way of working where we can be flexible, and us as a brand can say, look, we can see on our end, this isn't working, let's test something else until we get it right, and not just looking at it country by country, looking overall at brand awareness and growth and how we hit our goals in the region.
Anyone who wanted to ask a question? Yeah, we've got one in the middle here. Do we have a microphone available? Please could you just let us know who you are?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan. I work at Sky in media investment. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts. I'm just curious, we're working across different markets. Do you find that, I think you mentioned about moving into new markets, do you tend to use what you've learned in those markets to influence your established markets? And do you think that's quite something that's neutral? There's no sort of like the UK decides what we do in Europe and vice versa. Do you take learnings kind of all the time and move that and take, obviously change what you might be doing back in the UK?
I'd say we definitely have a bit of a playbook in terms of we're entering new regions. We always have digital media, we always have influencer, and then we build onwards from that depending on, again, how we think we're going to be received in market, how much education we need to do versus how much just shouting about the brand we need to do, and that really affects the channels. And then based on what we're seeing, we pull in levers we know that have fixed that problem in the past. So for instance, if we're in a market, like if we've gone into a market where France, for instance, we saw that and Germany is another example of this, we really needed to just show the value of dating apps. In Germany, we knew that they were a very product-focused audience, and it was much more about educating on what the product can do. And we did a big out-of-home campaign around product features and a digital campaign that supported that. In France, we knew it was much more based on having trusted voices that would back our product, and it was much more of an emotional thing that wasn't working. Therefore, we went really heavily on influencers, events, amplifying influencer content, amplifying podcasts, doing lots of content with just trusted voices, backing the product and saying Bumble was a good app. So definitely, when we see an issue that we've seen before, we do put in place solutions we've seen before. And the more and more we launch into new markets, we start learning, okay, if you're seeing this type of rejection or this kind of piece that's not working for our brand, for an audience, this is what you do to fix it. And then when it comes to launching in new markets, putting that into bigger markets, there have definitely been instances where we've seen that we've had, a small market who was scrappy with a low budget and a bright idea, and that's worked well. And then we said, okay, let's put that into a bigger market. Or on the flip side, we've seen a bigger market have something that's worked, and then we put that in a smaller market. I think a good example of that is we recently did a kindness campaign around kindness in dating, which sounds quite lofty, but we're more focused on just moments of compliments and kindness that were fun. So we did a UK out-of-home buy that I think is still running now, where we had a poster that, for instance, says, you look like you could take on the escalator at Angel, and just clever lines that seem a little like, not kindness in dating, just compliments in general and feeling good about a compliment. But we saw that drove cut through, and then we're rolling that out to some other markets. So yes, definitely, there's a lot of sharing of both channels and ideas between the countries.
I'm afraid we're out of time, unfortunately, but we're going to be moving shortly on to our next session. But please put your hands together for Nicole and for Jen.